I want to bring to your attention a couple of things before we get in there that I've been going through my notes on my computer, and I printed off some stuff that I haven't seen in a while, and I thought, holy crap, there's some very interesting stuff that I haven't talked about for a while that people might need to take in. It doesn't necessarily deal with the myth is Canada, but it does deal in general. It's a history that goes back several centuries in England and so forth. Prior to the reign of King Henry VIII, the rulers of England were vassals of the Pope. King Henry VIII broke with the papal authority, and he became the first absolute sovereign of England. Now, what were they referring to that they were vassals of the Pope? They're referring to the 1213 oath of fealty put forward by King John the Only. And he gave England and Ireland in perpetuity to the Pope and the Vatican, and with twice a year silver at Christmas and silver at Easter as a tie-in to the church, because he did something in 1209 called the Law of Mortmain that got the Archbishop of Canterbury left England, went back to the Vatican, and the king was now without counsel. And so, because he wanted the land, Law of Mortmain said that anybody who died under his reign and left their land to the church, it automatically came to the king. It's called the Law of Mortmain. Well, he got sick around 1213, and that's why he wrote the Oath of Fealty. Now, the Oath of Fealty was in play up until 1689. Even though King Henry VIII decided that he wasn't going to honor it, it was still active. And the first, so in 1215, when King John was taken by the nobles to sign off on the Magna Carta, 1215, he signed it, no problem. He's a manager. He's not the owner. And he knew that. The owner was the Pope. And the Pope refused to sign off. Pope Innocent III refused to sign off on it. And so consequently, the forthwith, they drafted in, under Queen Elizabeth I, they drafted the 39 articles which Her Majesty was induced to sign. Article 1 reads, "No gift or grant shall be made to any person without the consent of Parliament." So it became an absolute constitutional monarchy. Okay? And you're going to have to remember that, because I'm going to bring some stuff forward from 1946, 47, 1952, and you're going to see what happened there. And then it goes on to say, "This article transcends anything to be found in the Magna Carta 1225. Well, Magna Carta 1215, what happened? Like I say, Pope Innocent III didn't sign off on 1215 Magna Carta, and it never became English law. It wasn't until 1225 that the Magna Carta became English law, because the new Pope made a deal. He said, I will sign the Magna Carta with one change, just one change. Everywhere it says free man, or free men, 2 words, you will make it 1 word, freeman, freeman. And they did. And in the 1225 Magna Carta, the people pull out and say, oh no, that's a 1215, it's actually 1225. Why would the Pope ask to do just that one change? Do you know? Do you know what a freeman is? 1 word? Roman civil law, a slave with rights and privileges. But it's a slave with rights and privileges.
Just like person.
No, person is a fiction. Person is a fiction.
So is that what we are then?
It's different.
Say it again.
Well, if people that...
Say it again, a slave with...
Rights and privileges. So David Robinson, I don't think he's still alive, I think he passed away, in England, was, big proponent of Article 61 under the Magna Carta, 1215. And he used to quote from the Magna Carta what he said was 1215, which was actually the 1225 Magna Carta. because, and it was kind of funny, he said in a video that the nobles were Protestants, and they held the King John, who was a Catholic, to sign the Magna Carta. So I actually emailed him back in the day, and I asked him if I could get in contact with any of the nobles' bloodline, because I'd like to get my hands on their time machine. I mean, how did they go 400 years into the future to become Protestants, and then come back 400 years to hold the king to ransom, to help sign the Magna Carta? I never got a response. Sad. So it's kind of interesting because it comes into play as to the way we look at what's going on today, and the way we look at King Charlie, who actually isn't the King of Canada. He's not even the King in right of Canada, and I'll get into why a little bit later. We get to believe that we can find justice in the court system of a de facto government. A government that is illegal and unlawful, that runs a court system that is rigged against you immediately that you step across the threshold of the courthouse. You don't even have to go into the courtroom. You are assumed to be the fiction that they have created. Immediately. So why would, it's like going into the lion's den as a sheep to argue that you don't want to be dinner. And that's the problem with a lot of the freedom people who go to these courts thinking that they're going to do this or do that. Today, the people of Britain are the sovereign with the monarch. Okay? Not just the monarch. The UK does not own Canada today, as it is no longer a colony. Since December 11th, 1931, the ownership of the land is held by the people of each province. And I've said this time and time again, my Facebook page, if you join the Myth is Canada, who holds a allodial title to the land in Canada? The answer to that question is we, the people. We are the owners of the land. In order that sovereignty be exercised by a central government in Canada, it is indispensable that the sovereign people divest themselves of those powers which they collectively desire the central government to administer, and to cede to the central government some land, such as the District of Columbia in the United States, in Mexico City, the District of the Federal of Mexico. This is called the right of eminent domain. Anybody ever hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, do you know what eminent domain is? Okay, I'll get into that. Meech Lake Accord, 1987, Charlottetown Accord, 1992, and the Constitutional Reform Act, 2005. These acts and accords all tried to wrest control of the land and sovereignty away from the people by the de facto, non-sovereign, maritime incorporated federal authority. The Governor General was a corporation sole for the Central Legislature of Canada. The Lieutenant Governors were equally a corporation sole in legislatures of each province. The powers to act as the representatives of the Governor General, and they had all the powers necessary to carry on the government of the provinces. The last letters patent issued to a Governor General to Canada were those granted at the time of the appointment to Earl of Bessborough on March 23, 1931. The Statute of Westminster, issued on December 11, 1931, nullified those letters patent, a.k.a. the B&A Act, 1867, a.k.a. the Constitution Act, 1867, the position of the Governor General of Canada, and with it, the corporation sole.
So we shouldn't have Governor Generals or Lieutenant Governors.
And most of the lieutenant governors across the provinces, you go out to British Columbia, for example, if you look at how much of their stuff has had royal assent over the last 25 years, you'll find maybe 2 or 3 acts, but that's it. Because the governor generals are scared to put their signature on it, to give it royal assent, because they're scared that people will hang them at the end when they find out it's all fraud.
So what does that, how does that bring us to the eminent domain?
Well, I'm going to get there. Here. So we've covered enough from that here. Eminent domain. 147 sections, 10 repealed, none contain the clause ceding land to the federal authority to allow it to be sovereign. This would be called eminent domain. The unrestricted ownership of land, independent of all action from without and paramount over all action within. The right to exercise the power of eminent domain is inherent in sovereignty, necessary to it and inseparable from it. It is a part of the sovereign power of any nation. Instead, we have, from the Interpretations Act of Canada, for greater certainty includes the internal waters of Canada and the territorial seas. That's how they describe Canada, as water. They don't have eminent domain. The provinces don't have eminent domain. They have a form of what they call eminent domain, but it's, if you read it, it doesn't talk about land, it talks about property. And I had a client in Saskatchewan a couple of years ago where the province came in and they seized his property under what they call eminent domain, or maritime eminent domain, the fiction. And he fought them, but he didn't know that it wasn't a real eminent domain, because they didn't call it land, they called it property. What is property? According to them, improvement to land, which is what they tax you on. They don't tax you on the land, they tax you on property. Okay? So I'm going to go through a few definitions before we get started here tonight, and it just makes it a little bit easier for people to understand what I'll be going into. Fred? No, I said I'm going to go and do some definitions right now to help people understand. And I imagine a lot of you in here tonight probably know some of these definitions, maybe not. But let's take a quick look.
Sorry, can we just skip back a minute?
Go ahead.
When you said that they don't tax land,
They tax
property, but before we improved our property and had a house on it, they still charge us tax.
Of course they did. Did you have entrance to the property or to the land?
Yes.
A driveway or a pathway?
Well, an unmaintained road.
That's fine. That's property.
Yeah, exactly.
Any improvement to land is called property. So if you cut a path with a machete or scythe,
That's an improvement, okay.
and that's how you get away with it. And that's why you're all registered in fee simple, so that you are. Oh, I do. I have it here. Give me a second. I think I'll take this out. Let's see if I can find it first. I think you'll find it very interesting. There it is there. Yes. Okay, so this is, I'll pass this around, but I do want it back. This is a modern title for people. And if you can see where it says fee simple there, what does it say down here? Oh, okay. Joint tenants.
Joint what?
Tenants.
I'll start it over here, you guys. But I do want that back. It's part of another presentation I do.
But isn't that why we're going back to land patent and following the title, so we can prove that that's not correct?
If we didn't have a maritime jurisdictional government, yeah, that would work. But they are maritime jurisdiction. They don't care if you don't pay your taxes. They don't take you to court anymore. They go to a judge in chambers and get a seizure order on your property. And then they bring the police around at 2 o'clock in the morning, kick your door in and arrest you, empty your house, and then sell it. And how do I know that? Because I know I had a client in Manitoba, that's exactly what they did to him. They held him and his wife in jail for 60 days until the house was sold. They brought a dumpster to his house and emptied all the contents of the house into the dumpster, threw it in the dump. And then they put his house up for auction. And when he got out of jail, they gave him a check for $20,000 on a $400,000 house. That was what was left over after all the charges and interest and all this other stuff. And him and his wife, that's all they had. The shirt on their back and a check for $20,000 from them.
That's ridiculous.
It is.
It is absolutely.
And that's because he didn't pay his property taxes.
So is there any way to protect?
I told you there's a solution.
Okay.
A solution. So that's what we're going to get into a little bit here today. So, but let's first of all, let's look at what they. Now you probably have seen this, the Interpretations Act of Canada.
Yeah, I got one here.
Okay. So if you look up province, they have three definitions of province. Okay. The first definition is means the province of Prince Edward Island. Second definition is when used as meaning a part of Canada other than Prince Edward Island includes the Northwest Territories, the Yukon Territory, and Nunavut Territory.
Where are the rest of us?
Well, that's in the third one, right? Must be in the third definition. Here we go. Means a province of Canada and includes the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut.
And you're adding to the rest of us.
So, and includes means the exclusion of all others.
Yeah, I think they've gathered that. Inclusion of one is the exclusion of another. Okay. So
What year is that?
what is Ontario then if it's not a province of Canada?
Did you just read all three?
Yeah, that's all for.
It sounds like the second one repeated itself.
And
That
that's
third
right.
one repeats the second one.
But that's the highest definition. Okay. So what is Ontario? If it's not a province of Canada, what is it? I'm sorry?
Corporation.
It is. It's a sub-corporation of the parent. And that happened between 1982 and 1985. All the actual provinces were incorporated under the parent company. How do we know this? If you go down to Queen's Park and look at the flag in front of the Parliament building in Queen's Park, the Canadian flag is prominent and the provincial flag is behind it and lower. Meaning that that's the parent, because the Canadian flag does not belong to we the people. That's the Canadian military in 1976 were charged with trademark infringement. I'm not joking.
No, I know this.
And the federal government won against their own, what they thought was their own military, that they put the Canadian flag inside of the new uniform.
They
Yeah.
can take them off?
Yeah, it's trademark infringement. They didn't have permission.
So now
So it's not your
there's
flag.
flags all over Bancroft.
It's like when the trucker convoy went all the way up to Ottawa. After that, they put me on a Zoom with the guys, and it's really interesting because they had a 40-minute Zoom. And they said, "Oh, Doug, we've got 10 minutes. Can you do a presentation in 10 minutes?" I said, I doubt it, but I have pay-as-I-go Zoom, so I can have it for as long as I want. Why don't we shut that down? I'll send you a link and you send it out. So they did, and the 40 people that were on the free one came back, and I talked for 2 hours on basically what is the white flag and the flag of Parliament, and why they should have gone into Ottawa flying that, because they said, and as I explained, Trudeau looked out the window and he goes, "Oh, look at all these wonderful people. They're flying my flag and they agree with what I've done." And then he opened the window and he went, "Oh my God, this is a false flag event." And he was right. But if they would have flown the flag of Parliament, and that would be the only flag, they wouldn't have had to fly any others. And they would have set up on Parliament, right, with a table and chairs, and waited for the representative to come out and sit. And because the flag of parley is not the people are surrendering. A flag of parley is when the overwhelming military of one side comes to allow the other military to bow out gracefully without any more death. That's a flag of parley. So we the people are 34 million. They are small. We held all the cards. If we would have sat down with them and allowed them to fly to Kiev to meet with their buddy, all 185 of them, and signed over all their belongings to we the people, because they certainly didn't deserve it, we would have had a whole different situation.
But do you think that would have really happened had someone gone in there with that flag?
I think that if the white flag was flown and they attacked, I think the Canadian military would have stepped in because that's against the Geneva Convention. It's black and white Geneva Convention, and would have arrested whoever did that and charged them with a crime under the Geneva Convention being a war crime. And I think you would have seen the government collapse at that point. Yes.
So they need to do it at a convoy and take the white one.
Well, what's happened has happened. So,
Is the white flag totally square or is it a rectangle?
it's usually a rectangle.
The same, because I was told the square flag, rectangle, you're under contract. I haven't heard that. Is that?
You done?
I've been square before.
We talked about the white flag, didn't we?
So you guys probably know about human rights. How many people here understand human rights?
Do we have any?
We don't have.
How many people here believe that you have human rights? Anybody have human rights?
Not humor, 1980 somewhere.
Human rights. So I have, this is from 1948, the dictionary. I like the old dictionaries because they don't change them usually. And if I can get my hands on the first edition. Bouvier's, or I'm sorry, this is Valentine. This is Valentine. So, human being, sea monster.
Yeah.
Sea monster. So people understand that. Then you go to monster in Valentine, and it says very clearly, a human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal, a monster, hath no inheritable blood, and cannot be heir to any land, albeit it be brought forth in marriage.
What the heck?
Yeah. No property rights, ladies and gentlemen. You don't own your body, you don't own your land, you don't own your labor.
If you're a
But if
monster.
we didn't
If you claim to be a human being,
Define yourself as human.
Human being.
Then that's
what you.
that's the Declaration of Human Rights that the UN has. Oh, you got it. And they know exactly that the minute you make claim under that, you've given up your body, you've given up your labor, and that's when the WHO comes in and says, roll up your sleeve. And you go, oh, you claim human rights, roll up your sleeve, you're our slave.
So what does one claim?
Unalienable rights, period.
What happened to the monsters there?
I'm sorry, what happened to the
There was a
monsters?
monster definition there.
it's not even in the blacks. It's not even in there.
No, blacks is terrible.
I know, but
Stuff out
it's
every
not
year.
there at all now.
I'm sorry?
It was something, you were reading monster in there, something.
So,
unalienable,
just curious on that note, so if you say, and of course it's just whatever, if you say that I waive my right to be seen as a person, a legal person in law, is that, but it's not that?
well, that's something else. Okay, and those are, but yes, the legal person in law is in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. That's Article 16 or 6 is it? And 16 on the covenant.
It says you're a monster if you didn't inherit.
If you claim as a human being, human rights, you are considered a monster and not able to have property rights.
Considered a monster, okay, got it.
So you claim human rights. I have human rights. Yes. Now roll up your sleeve. So unalienable. Somebody asked about unalienable. Unalienable with you. The state of a thing or right which cannot be sold. Things which are not in commerce as public roads are in nature unalienable. Some things are inalienable in the consequence of particular provisions in law forbidding their sale or transfer, as pensions granted by the government. The natural rights of life and liberty are unalienable, and that comes from Bouvier's dictionary, 1856 edition. Then I have Black's Law, which is their 6th edition, incapable of being alienated, that is sold or transferred.
That's it.
You cannot surrender or sell or transfer unalienable rights. They are a gift from the Creator to the individual and cannot under any circumstances be surrendered or taken. All individuals have unalienable rights. So, Why did they create the legal fiction? The person. Your all caps version of the name. Why did they do that? Because they know that men and women have unalienable rights. So who do they tax? They tax the person. Now you get the bigger picture. They're not stupid. They set this up in a way to corral the sheep. And they lock the door behind you. Now they use the term inalienable with an I. Ooh.
Yeah.
Rights which are not capable of being surrendered or transferred without the consent of the one possessing such rights. Ooh, so you can give them up. And that's Morrison v. State of Missouri. Yeah, that was in the U.S. You can transfer, you can surrender, sell, or transfer inalienable rights if you consent either actually or constructively.
Define constructively.
Which is tacit agreement, right?
There you go. Inalienable rights are not inherent in man and can be alienated by government. Persons have inalienable rights. Most state constitutions recognize only inalienable rights.
So in this country, are they using the expression unalienable?
No.
No,
Inalienable.
So how does one become the proper one?
well,
You already
you
are.
already are.
You just have to. Those who don't declare your rights have none. That's a maxim in law. So if you don't declare, then they will assume. I love that word. They assume you're in a courtroom. They assume you read the contract, and that's why you're there to defend.
So how do you declare? Like, and make it
Simply,
official?
I have unalienable rights. That's it.
And then what do they do?
Depends on the circumstance.
If you were
They could beat you up. They could turn around and walk away. Depending on. We've got a couple more definitions. Allodial and allodium. Do we know what that is? Allodial means free, not holden of any lord or superior, owned without obligation of vassalage or fealty, the opposite of feudal. Joint tenants. Feudal. Be simple. Allodium. I use the term allodium quite a bit. And that means land held absolutely in one's own right. And not of any lord or superior. Land not subject to feudal duties or burdens. An estate held by absolute ownership without recognize any superior to whom any duty is due on account thereof.
So that's allodium.
Allodium. And Webster's first dictionary, 1825, their definition of allodium is land which is absolute property of the owner. Real estate held in absolute independence without being subject to any rent, service, or acknowledgement to a superior. Now we're going to talk a little bit tonight about letters patent. And the easiest, most simple way to give you of what is a letters patent example. How many of you have gone and looked up your Crown Grant in this room? Okay. Those are letters patent, by the way. That's letters patent. So what is it? What is the definition? Always in plural, letters patent are a type of legal instrument in the form of a published written order issued by a monarch, president, or other head of state, generally granting an office, a right, or a status to a person. Now, we're talking common law here, so the word person means man or woman. Letters patent are issued for the appointment of representatives of the Crown, the British North America Act, letters patent, such as Governor Generals of the Dominions of the Commonwealth realms, as well as appointing royal commissions. So why would they give the Governor General letters patent? Because he's a corporation's soul. So what is a corporation's sole? As by definition, it consists of one person only and their successors in some particular station who are incorporated by law, not color of law, by law, in order to give them some legal capacity and advantages, particularly that of perpetuity, which is in their natural state they could not have had. Okay. So I use the term de facto. And it's Latin for in fact. Often used in a place of actual to show that the court will treat as a fact authority being exercised, or an entity acting as if it had authority. An entity acting as if it had authority. One more time. An entity acting as if it had authority.
So they have no authority whatsoever.
Correct.
Only what we did then.
Even though the legal requirements have not been met. De facto means existing, but not by law. Well, here's a fun one for you. I'll give you this. We're going to get into this in a minute here. Patriate. Everybody's heard of the word repatriate? Yes. And the federal government would like you to believe that the British North American Act was repatriated by none other than Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1982, when the reality was he created a new word, and that word wound up in various dictionaries across the globe, and that word is patronage. To bring under authority of an autonomous country, for example, as in the transfer of a photocopy of the British North American Act, aka Constitution Act 1867, from the UK to Canada for the first time.
That's actually in there?
Yeah.
A photocopy?
Well, that's what we have, but
Yeah, I asked a few politicians over the years, can you please point to another country that has a photocopy for their constitution? And another question I would ask is, okay, so we have the Constitution Act 1982. What other country has a notwithstanding clause in their constitution? None.
So what does the what not?
The notwithstanding clause suspends the Constitution so the government can do whatever it wants.
So what's the point of having it?
Exactly.
Well, that's what.
So we're going to get into the history on this right now. So I'm going to pull the history lesson. And we'll go forward from that. I think you've got enough definitions to get your head around, but you'll notice that when I do speak, I will be using a lot of those words that we just defined. So let's get into this. Okay. I always like reading this. This is a quote from Russell Rogers Smith. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Russell Rogers Smith. And if not, you can go on to the Admittance Canada website. We have his books up there in PDF format, and I suggest that if you don't only read one book, read Ho Canada, which was written in 1965. It will clarify for you a lot of the stuff that has gone on up to 1965. So, the debate on the Quebec resolutions, October 10th, 1864, in the legislature of Upper and Lower Canada ended by a ratification March 13th, 1865. Immediately, the Imperial Parliament countered the move by enacting the Colonial Laws Validity Act, June 29, 1865. To show the colonists that it was they, and not the colonial legislature, that had the power to govern. Revising the draft and briefing the Quebec resolutions in the form of a bill called the Kingdom of Canada Papers, John A. Macdonald and the delegates from Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick presented these to the Earl of Carnarvon, Secretary for the Colonies, on December 26, 1966. Instead of bluntly refusing, the Earl of Carnarvon delegated Lord Thrigg, Parliamentary Secretary, to the Treasury to draft a bill to conform as much as possible to the Kingdom of Canada draft, but to nullify its purpose and to give the authority of the Governor-General to act as a dictator. John A. Macdonald got a wife, a title, and a membership in His Majesty's Imperial Privy Council, Canada got the British North American Act letters patent.
Stop it.
Now,
That's what she gave her, just the
this was the title page. I've blown it up. This was the title page that they put on the DNA Act when they put it through the House of Lords for its singular reading in 1867. I'm going to go ahead and take it, pass it around. Now, why would he do that? Because they wanted it to look similar to the Kingdom of Canada bill or papers, but without actually being that. So he put that onto the House of Lords. When they did the only reading in the House of Lords, they took it back and then they took that off. Whoop!
Cover it in.
Took the cover off, and then they went down to the House of Commons, and they read the British North American Act 3 times over 3 days, without ever having one copy ever issued. Well, why would they do that?
Because they want you studying.
Photocopies were too expensive then.
Such a little smarty.
Kinko's and closed for the week.
There we go. That's it.
You want me to do what?
Well, they didn't make copies, first and foremost, and they needed to rush it through because the Americans, don't forget, 1865, what happened in the States? It was the end of the War of Northern Aggression. And the southern states had lost. Ooh, who backed the southern states? The British Empire. The British Empire backed the southern states. They couldn't have any destabilization in their colonies. So the BNA Act was created to give stabilization. Absolute stabilization. So, Section 12, under this 147 sections. Section 12, all powers under the Acts to be executed by the Governor General with the advice of the Privy Council, or alone.
Or alone.
Or alone.
Wow.
Right there in black and white.
Total,
Absolute
again.
power.
absolute power.
All powers under Acts to be exercised by the Governor General with the advice of the Privy Council, or alone. So, what is the Parliament of Canada in here?
Dictatorship.
No, the Parliament of Canada is an advisory body to an advisory body to the Government of Canada,
Which is the Governor General.
which is the Governor General. Today, that's a little bit different, and we'll get into that after. So, the way that they created the BNA Act was that they would pass it through the House of Lords on 1 reading, 3 readings at the House of Commons, onto the Court of Chancery, and then for royal assent, and then onto the Court of St. James for Queen Victoria to hand the letters patent to her Governor General for Canada. Such a pain in the butt. Well, it is. And it's timely, and you got to book the time in the Parliament and so forth. So what did they do? In 1878, believe me, I came across this simply by accident.
Revocation.
The Revocation Act, 1878. Ha-ha! They created a commission. So the Governor General would come back to England with his letter patent and a cover letter on it, go back to the commission and hand it in. They would take the cover letter off, put a new cover letter on, hand that to the next Governor General. Saved all the time of 3 readings of the House of Commons, 1 reading of the House of Lords, off to the Court of Chancery for royal assent, off to the Court of St. James where Queen Victoria would hand them to her next Governor General. This would take 5 minutes rather than 5 days. Efficient use of time. Victorians were smart people. What I found to be very interesting, and this is what caught Cal Washington with his pants down around his ankles. I said, you know about this act? And he goes, no, I never heard of it. well, you're basing a lot of your information on Queen Victoria's death and how the BNA Act went and got nullified at her death. And I said, that's not true. This act, section 9 says, and we do hereby reserve to ourselves, our heirs and successors, full power and authority from time to time to revoke, alter, or amend these, our letters patent, as to us or them shall seem meet.
Anytime, anywhere,
Okay. 1878. So in 1893, through the Statute Law Revision Act, I just took what was repealed from that. I don't expect, I'll tell you what. There you go. They repealed the enacting clause, which is highlighted in yellow here. And by doing that, they didn't kill the document, they locked it. In other words, it could not be opened again. In other words, Parliament couldn't receive this and reenact it like they normally would if they didn't have this commission. Okay? But they also repealed Section 2. What is Section 2? Application of provisions referring to the Queen. The provisions of this act referring to Her Majesty, the Queen, extend also to the heirs and successors of Her Majesty's kings and queens of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. They didn't need it. They had the 1878 Act. So they could then send this on after Queen Victoria's death on January, what was it, 22nd, 1901. They could continue to give the letters patent to Governor Generals every 4 years, and they did.
But that was kind of a secret.
No! Well, yeah, kind of, because I found it going through secessional papers. I was reading, I don't know, there was an 11-volume set, and a friend of mine, Jim, sent me, I think it was volume 8, and asked me if I'd seen this act that he had. And I had, I'll go over it and said, yes, Jim, thank you very much. And then I started to continue to read in that. And that's when I found this, buried about another 50 pages. I went, oh, isn't that cool? So I tried to research it over on the archive site in England, and they said it existed, but not for download. Not for download. In other words, it wasn't
in person, but not.
it wasn't electronic. So that was fine. I took it out of the secessional papers, and like I said, when I told Cal, I said, "You gotta go read it." He's like, "Oh my God, never heard of that." They said, "Download it from the Myth is Canon," because he was saying that at Queen Victoria's death, it ended BNA, and it didn't.
Because of that.
Because of that act. And, you know, a lot of people, and this is not a slight against Cal Washington by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of people don't know what they don't know. Because the information, it took me almost 14 years to put together the timeline on the Myth is Canon. And we added the 1878 Act when, in 2018 or 2019? He takes care of my website. Shawn does. I can't remember. So, but we're still adding stuff. I've got some more stuff that we're going to be adding over the next week or so. So the research never stops with me. I continuously read and continue to do further research. So a lot of people wouldn't have known about this. But when I did tell Cal, he was like quite surprised. Now.
So his wins in court were just based on the judge not knowing that too.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of ignorance on both sides, and you get judges and JPs. They're just, you know, they're clueless. I also want to bring, now this is just a little bit of a sidebar I'm going to do here. Section 109 of BNA is very interesting, and this is why. Let me read it to you first. All lands, mines, minerals, royalties belonging to the several provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, at the Union, and all sums then due or payable for such lands, mines, minerals, or royalties shall belong to the several provinces of Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, in which the same are situate or arise, subject to any trusts existing in respect thereof, and to any interest other than that of the province in the same. And to any interest other than that of the province in the same, they're talking about crown patent.
But I thought Ontario wasn't the province.
This is 1867,
Oh,
not 1982.
okay.
So, they recognize the crown patents right there. So how do you get the court to recognize them here? I wouldn't do it unless it was me doing it. You get them to acknowledge that they are bound by the Constitution Act 1867 because 9214 creates the provincial court. And then they're bound by that, then they're bound by this. And you get precedent.
So that's the solution.
No,
This is the start.
no. The solution is, we'll get there, trust me. I love your enthusiasm.
Sorry, say that again? Okay, so that document that you have there, what is that?
Here, come,
No, what's that?
you can read it yourself. Oh,
Was that section 109 you said?
Section 109, yes, of DNA. So, I'm going to tell you a story. There we go. I'll do it here. Delegates from Canada had no part in drafting the British North American Act in 1867, and no certified copy of the Act was brought to Canada. The Act was drafted by Lord Thrane. It is not a constitution, for it constitutes nothing. If anything, it constitutes a dictatorship. It simply emphasizes the power of the Governor-General to appoint and remove a Privy Council to aid and advise him, and to state that the Governor-General has the power to pass an order in council by himself, individually as the case requires. An order in council is equal to an act of Parliament. 102 years later, the Interpretations Act 1889 was passed, stating that Canada is a colony. It gives the lie to the story of Confederation and brands it as a reductio ad absurdum. Another recent absurdity is that the House and Senate of British subjects debating the adoption of the flag and anthem. You say you have never heard of this before? You are not alone in this. Since 1931, Canadian citizens are not subject to laws enacted by the British government and are not recognized by Great Britain as British subjects. To sum it up, Canada lost everything gained politically in the previous 100 years and reverted back to the Constitution granted in 1763 to Governor James Murray by the Board of Trade, Secessional Papers 18. Lord Monck came back to Canada as a corporation sole, and his first act was upon opening Parliament was to announce that John A. Macdonald had been granted the title of Sir. John A. Macdonald did very well for himself. He obtained a title, a lady, and a bride, an annual stipend, was a member of the Imperial Privy Council, and now the Right Honourable Sir John A. Macdonald. So, in 1871, we're going back to the Civil War. In 1871, there was something called the Washington Treaty. Now, the Washington Treaty was negotiated by John A. Macdonald on behalf of the British Empire. We did not have a representative from the Dominion of Canada at that treaty negotiation. John A. Macdonald was there on the Queen's Privy Council only to represent Great Britain. And he did a wonderful job. He created the 49th parallel. But the Great Lakes and all the locks and the St. Lawrence Seaway, he gave to the Americans free of charge, in perpetuity forever, that the Dominion taxpayers would pay for all the maintenance and up.
Wow.
That's John A. Macdonald.
Thanks for what?
Under the bus.
That's a gift for hiring a drunk. Sorry.
No, but So people say, oh, John A. Macdonald was this great man. No, he wasn't. He was bought and paid for. And so we today, still, to this day, pay for all the maintenance and upkeep of the St. Lawrence Seaway, all the locks and everything else that goes into the Great Lakes, and the Americans pay nothing.
But they actually legally own it.
No, it's split between us through the treaty.
Oh.
Okay. But they have complete access without charge. Whereas we pay for it, the taxes. And it's quite expensive, the upkeep. But that was John A. Macdonald, thank you very much.
Why would he do that? If he was
Because
there.
he worked for the Queen of England. They also came up with
But why
a,
benefit the US? Like,
because the British Empire sank hundreds of US bottoms or ships during that war. And they owed a bunch of money. And who wound up paying? Yeah, the Dominion of Canada. He made sure that the British Empire never paid. The money came out of the Dominion of Canada to pay the US. How nice of him. Saved the Queen hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. He's not, the statues say, oh, he's the first Prime Minister. He was a dog. A nasty dog at that. So, as time went on, sorry. Listen. As time went on, and I'm going to jump ahead to 1926, because this is what, there are several secret imperial conferences. But the 1926 secret imperial conference was very important. It was held in England, blah, 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 along with, people from Australia, New Zealand, et cetera, going to and they're called secret imperial conferences because they were held behind closed doors. And our Prime Minister at the time, William Lyon Mackenzie King, was given this document in September of 1926. This document, being the Native Sons of Canada, and the head of the Native Sons of Canada, the man that wrote the minutes, was a guy called Russell Rogers Smith. And these minutes were incorporated into the minutes from the 1926 Imperial Conference. And those minutes were called the Balfour Declaration 1926, which Lord Balfour wrote. And that's, yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is the same Balfour that did the Balfour Declaration of 1918. Hence created the State of Israel. So, what's interesting, because of the relationship between Russell and William Lyon, he gave those minutes to William Lyon in October. He took them over to England in November. They were incorporated in. And 1930, the final secret imperial conference, the Balfour Declaration was incorporated into their minutes and then turned over to the parliamentary secretary, who put them to a commission, and that commission wrote this little document called the Statute of Westminster. Now, the three specific clauses that apply to Canada, right, came from the Native Sons of Canada minutes. And Russell Rogers. And what did they make sure happened? They made sure that on December 11th, 1931, the Dominion of Canada ended. And the provinces were free to seat a de jure federal government if they so chose. Now on December 11th, the land that was held in the court and chancery, was returned to the provinces and then on to the people so they could go ahead and do that. Hence, who holds the allodial title to all the land in Canada?
We the people.
We the people. We'd like to take a closer look.
And they haven't
So,
did anything since then to
Why
change
is
that?
that?
No, they can't.
Can't-
This is interesting, and I'm gonna I'll hand this around to you guys, but this actually came from the UK archives itself. I downloaded it as a PDF and printed it off. So that's what it looks like from England. That's the actual English one. So, so 7.1 and 7.2 and section 11 are the three sections that apply to the Dominion of Canada.
Sorry, say the sections again.
7.1, I'll read them to you. Nothing in this act shall be deemed to apply to the repeal, amendment, or alteration of the British North American Acts 1867 to 1930, or any order, rule, or regulation made under that. Okay. So, during his deposition in 1946, Russell was deposed by a guy called George Barr, who was the King's Counsel from Ottawa, and William Lyon Mackenzie King wanted to know how screwed they were. So he sent him down. And so the answer that Barr asked him the question, you are aware, of course, that under Section 7, subsection 1, the benefit of the Statute of Westminster insofar as the Dominion itself is concerned is withheld. That is, the provisions of Section 2 in regard to the Colonial Laws Validity Act do not apply to the British North American Act. Consequently, the Dominion government cannot repeal or amend any portion of that act. Is it not fair to say that insofar as the Dominion is concerned, the Statute of Westminster left us in exactly the same position as we were before that, insofar as the Dominion Parliament is concerned? The answer is absolutely not. The British North American Act is a statute of the Imperial Parliament creating an ancillary body to aid and advise the Governor-General, whose letters patent, and it could only be effective if there is a duly appointed Governor-General for Canada. As no person receives any credentials from the Commission to act as the Governor-General of Canada, we may, if we choose, disregard the British North American Act. In other words, it's a dead document. And then he goes on. Barr asked, he said, as Section 7.2 grants to each province individually those powers which were granted to the Commonwealth of Australia, the Union of South Africa, the Irish Free State, New Zealand, and Newfoundland, the provinces of Canada can either assert themselves as sovereign states, or they may mutually agree to create a union of provinces. So the question, what, if any, difference is there in respect to the appointment of a Governor-General in Canada since the passing of the Statute of Westminster? In answering your question, I may say, without fear of contradiction, that since the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, no Governor-General has been dispatched to Canada by the British government, or any department of that government. Instead of the Governor-General, we now have a British High Commissioner. The President incumbent of that office being the Right Honourable Malcolm MacDonald, whose address is in Earl's Court, Ottawa. The province is no longer a colony, but a sovereign state. The provinces possess all sovereign power. Canada is no longer under colonial office by reason of the enactment of the Statute of Westminster, December 11, 1931. The colonial office has not accredited a governor to Canada. So, Section 11. And this is the key. This meant the interest of the Crown and Chancery, which interest was held as long as the province was a colony. This interest of the Crown and Chancery was relinquished in Section 11 of the Statute of Westminster. Section 11 reads, notwithstanding anything in the Interpretations Act 1889, the expression colony shall not in any act of Parliament of the United Kingdom passed after the commencement of this act include a dominion or any province or state forming a dominion. As there is no intermediate status between that of a colony and of a sovereign state, and any province of Canada is no longer a colony, they must by necessity be sovereign states as they come within the requirements set for them in section 11.
So has anything changed from then till now? Or
They tried. They tried. So,
so we're still a sovereign,
no.
oh, we're not.
No. Well, we the people are. The government is de facto maritime jurisdiction. So this was also a dispatch. The United Kingdom in December of 1931 recalled their Governor General and said, in the future, no department of the government of the United Kingdom is concerned in any way with the appointment of another. And that's from file number 624-30, Department of State for External Affairs. So the Parliament said, we ain't going to send another Governor General, ever. Go ahead.
Can you speak to why you have military influence, like the Governor General, Lieutenant Governor, all that? What is that about?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Russians down at the tender.
Well, honestly, I don't know. I have no idea. Sorry. It's never come into...
I'm just wondering, there's a Lieutenant Governor, Governor General, it's kind of like a military.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is.
But they're dictatorships, don't forget. So it doesn't surprise me that it would be military. So what's interesting is between 1931 and 1937, they said, oh, ladies and gentlemen, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The Dominion of Canada lives on. I'm going to pass that around. Now this is what I want to show you is Dominion of Canada. So up until 1937, that's what the currency looked like. You'd like to. So in 1937, they went over to England in 1936 with a section 148 for the BNA Act. And section 148 would have given them all the power and taken it away from all the people. So they wanted the British Empire to pass it into the British North American Act, put it in there, and then give them the British North American Act to come back. And the British Parliament told them, are you nuts? That's fraud, international fraud. Go back to Canada and tell the people. I actually have section 148, we should put that up on the website. It is horrible to read, but anyways, that's what they tried to do. So in 1937,
Who is they?
powers that be in Ottawa
At the time.
at the time. So in 1937, this is what's interesting. These are the banknotes from that time.
So the Bank of Canada and the Dominion. This is Dominion.
So 1936 Dominion, 1937,
Bank of Canada.
just Canada. That's all it says. It's Canada. Woo, what happened?
Lost the Dominion.
Lost the Dominion. But they didn't tell the people to seat, to hold a constitutional convention, elect the delegates, and let's write a constitution. They didn't say that.
So what happened to the military and the police power? Like, they just, how did they usurp that? Like, okay, so,
Well, the military to this day is the Royal. The Royal, there's a reason for this, it's called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It's not the provincial mounted police. It's not the federal mounted police. It is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Who do they swear their oath of allegiance to? To the Queen or the King, exactly. And so at that time, they had the small cities had their own police forces under their municipal acts and so forth. So nothing really changed. Even today, you join the military, what happens? You swear your allegiance to the Queen or the King. So time comes on, and in 1946, yes, there we go.
military in Trenton swear to? Also-
1946,
No, that would be crown.
the King of England appoints his buddy, Alexander of Tunis, to be the Governor General of Canada. Wait a minute, didn't they, Parliament say that they would never send another?
Yeah, I did.
And now the King of England
Appointing someone.
is appointing his friend, Alexander of Tunis, to be the Governor General of Canada.
But that's not the parliament.
Is he working outside? Remember I said we would get into this. What happened way back in the 1600s is 39 articles that made it a constitutional monarchy. Working outside of his constitutional monarchy, he appoints a Governor General. He also, by his command, commands the Canadian Parliament to write letters patent. There we go. 1947. So we got two. This is an original, and this is a Word doc. But that's the letters patent that he asked them to write, like he commissioned to write. Now, did this man have a spine? Of course not. If you look at the end, and if you signed it, by His Majesty's command, William Lyon Mackenzie King. The Prime Minister King. Why wouldn't the King sign it? Because he knew the moment he put wedding signature to this piece of paper, they'd slip a noose over his head and hang him for treason. So what did Alexander of Tunis go and do? What did he do? Bill 338 is what he gave royal assent to. You know what 338 is? 1948. 1948. Income Tax Act.
Yeah.
Here's your income tax. That's how you got it. By an illegal and unlawful appointment of a Governor General through fraudulent letters patent. Gives you fraudulent income tax. Do you guys pay income tax every year?
Yeah, no.
Not anymore.
Some of you do, but some of you don't. But I bet you none of you have read Section 3, computation of income.
In this bill?
No, in income tax.
Oh, in the,
I know, because a friend of mine who was 15 years as a tax attorney never read Section 3. Section 3 is really interesting to read because if you read it correctly, and if you're not an employee of, because they talk about employment, of a sovereign, a monarch, or a foreign government, you have to refer to Section 3F, and your income would be 0. Now, if you were to say, well, I made a mistake, I want to get my money back because I screwed it up, because you signed that document under penalty of perjury. So you signed it lying, and they will say, well, you lied to us? Well, no, I made a mistake. You lied to us. And then they charge you with perjury.
Yeah.
So what they look at is because you're not filing correctly and you're signing under penalty of perjury, that you're actually donating to us. And that's why you don't get it back. But you could change it the following year and the following year. So. But you can't get your money back.
What are you changing?
You file properly under 3F. Computation of income 3F.
So what are you suggesting, that you file it, but under that?
Yeah. Well, by law, you're supposed to file.
no, hey,
Exactly, color of law. To the person. Because they're not collecting income tax from you, the woman. They're collecting income tax from you, the fiction.
So I'll just have to go find the fiction,
So you have to have your employer will stop taking income tax.
No, you just put brackets around it when you file at the end of the year.
Oh.
So, Lizzie was no better than her daddy. And she, by her own, working outside of the British Parliament, by her command, commanded the Canadian Parliament to write the Royal Styles and Titles Act. Really short.
Royal what?
Styles and Titles Act. Yeah. Cole's note version of it. I, Queen Elizabeth, declare myself the Queen and right of Canada.
Thanks.
That's it. That's the entire act.
Why?
There's no heirs and successors.
There's no heirs or successors.
Oh, so she's long gone though.
So how do we get the King and right of Canada? If there are no heirs and successors, and they didn't create a new Royal South and Titles Act.
And if you point it out to them, they will.
They do know,
They do know.
they very much know.
They just don't care because what are you gonna do?
Because if not everybody will come in, so
Yes, that's right.
King Charles
Don't
is
worry,
really
they're
around long
getting
Everyone
years.
knows he's not.
anyway, they're all
So
anyway.
there's a lot of Canadian, there's a couple Canadian heroes. Back in the 80s and late 70s, Elmer Knutson in Alberta was teaching a lot of the people there about basically what I'm teaching here today. And he wrote a book, but it dealt with the Western provinces. Then because of, there's another gentleman by the name of Walter Cool. I'm sure you've all heard of Walter Cool, yes? And he has a book, Canada, a Country Without a Constitution. You can download the books from the website, The Myth of Canada. They're free for download, they're PDF. But he's also famous for this lovely letter to René Lévesque in 1976. And I believe this is the sign. Let's see.
What year?
1976. So this was a gift from a guy called Eldon Warman when he sent it to me, because it's very hard to find with Walter Cool's signature on it. So he sent me this as a gift. And this is what got me on the road to the Myth of Canada, because there's a very famous sentence in there. It says, Mr. Lévesque, you cannot have a divorce without first having a marriage. Canada has no constitution, and we never confederated. So Lévesque, not being a stupid person, goes to Ottawa with the letter. And he goes and sees Trudeau. And Trudeau reads the letter, and yeah, well, Lévesque says, is it real? And he says, yes. What? But here's the deal, René. You're going to go back to Quebec, and every time you saber rattle a little bit about separation, the referendum, we're going to increase your transfer payments.
A little extortion.
And you're going to get rich. And so to this day, they...
comes up quite regularly, doesn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Alberta went $10 billion in debt a few years ago to pay a transfer payment to Quebec. And Quebec, once they got their transfer payment, had a $3 billion overage on their budget. Pretty cool.
And Alberta was in debt.
And Alberta was 10 billion in debt for that. Anyway. So, 1982. If you go on The Myth is Canada is it on YouTube? I think it's on YouTube. I did a roundtable with Brian Peckford. And I wanted people said, why didn't you go after him? Why did you attack him, blah, blah, blah. He's the last living guy that was in Ottawa during that time. And he told a wonderful story. You should go on and watch it. The way that Trudeau kind of figured, okay, all the premiers are representatives of the people, so we don't need to hold a constitutional convention because we have all the representatives of the people. And in a legislative democracy, 20% of the people voted for this guy, 10% of the people voted for that guy in the provinces, so there wasn't full representation, but that's what they had you believe. And that's why during that timeline, they had the convention of premiers. They called it to write a constitution. Because the premiers represented the people from all the provinces. It was a big pile of horseshit. And they knew that they couldn't ratify it, but they could get this as a foreign government act. This is why they did it. And Peckford tells the story of this and that and how his input changed a little of this and that input. But he also tells us a little bit about René Lévesque. And René Lévesque wouldn't trust Trudeau and the Liberal Party as far as he could throw them. He really hated them as well.
But he'd take their money.
Oh, absolutely. Well, of course, why not? But he knew that Trudeau was a communist, and he knew that it was a problem. So, anyways, the conference breaks up, and René does not go back to Quebec. He hangs around and he waits for, because he knew the Liberals were going to rewrite the Constitution, but the Constitution. He knew it. And he tried to get into, he went in to get into the room where they were doing this. They had all the big caucus and so forth. And they had security come and walk him and put him on the curb outside Parliament. Put him on the curb and told him to go back to Quebec. And sure enough, when it was all said and done, and that's when the notwithstanding clause was put in, because they did put it in, the Liberal government did, and so forth. A bunch of other changes were done, and off to Europe it went. What was his name? The guy, I can't remember. Talked with the Liberal that talked with the funny. Yeah. He was the one that took it to the Queen over in England. And then Johnny come lately, Mr. Trudeau comes over for this. The proclamation.
It does appear away.
Well, remember it was on TV and she signed with a pen and they gave him a pen and he signed with a pen. And yeah, it was, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Off we go. So, this is beautiful, this is why I love this. Because if you look at the documentation that Ottawa is spitting out these days, they use the word repatriation. He repatriated the BNA Act. But here it is here. And whereas the Parliament of the United Kingdom has, at the request and with the consent of Canada, enacted the Canada Act, which provides for the patriation and amendment of the Constitution of Canada. So there it is there. That's where that new word was created. And it's in black and white. And so it goes on to say, and whereas Section 58 of the Constitution Act 1982 set out in Schedule B to the Canada Act provides that the Constitution Act 1982, subject to Section 59, therefore come into force on a day to be fixed by the proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada. So what does that mean? Well, if you go to section 59, it takes you to 58, which takes you to 23.1a. 23.1a talks about the languages in provinces, and they want 23.1a repealed, which would take away the multilingual. So guess who never signed on? René Lévesque. Never did it. And there was never a second proclamation written. And hence the Canada Act has never been ratified into color of law for them because it's maritime jurisdiction. And there we are today with a de facto, illegal and unlawful federal government, illegal and unlawful provincial government. So what in 1931 happened with the Statute of Westminster was they freed us to seat a de jure government federal. And they wanted a constitutional monarchy for Canada, except it never took place. So between 82 and 85, when they did the subcorporations of the parent company on all what we know as the provinces of Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, etc., they became de facto as well. So now we have to seat a de jure government in the province before we can even look at talking about creating a federal authority. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, the solution to the problem. Thank you very much.
So what
There you go.
happened when you talked to Brian Peckford about this?
I never did.
Okay.
And I guess he's an old man. And I'm not an asshole.
No, but there's a difference between being an asshole and bringing facts to light because, you know what, we never knew any of this.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of
my friend Dominic, because I never met him other than being on a round table online. And my friend Dominic went to one of his events that he put on and tore him a new asshole.
Oh, no, that's not gonna do that.
Well, no, but Peckford came after Dom, and Dominic just stood his ground and literally destroyed him with the facts. He didn't call names or anything like that. He just said, bring out this, show me this. Where is that? Well, this was supposed to be done. Why is that? And Peckford was just, guys, you can go to the website as well, under constitutional committees. I wrote a book, how to do that community-wise, put together a community to elect or appoint delegates. Also, how to write a constitution is up there. Under the solution tab, there's, I think, 9, and it walks you through how to do it properly so that it's internationally recognized. I always point now to 2 places in the world that have done this. In 2012, Iceland did it in 30 days. Yeah, they wrote a new constitution in 2 weeks and they ratified it in 2 weeks, 30 days.
How much of their population needs to be involved in that?
100%.
So we
100%.
don't have that here then.
Yeah.
Oh no, you get it. Oh yeah. You only need about 4 or 5% to get started. That's it. And then it just starts to snowball. The second country that did this was the Donbass. When they wanted to leave the Ukraine and join Russia. And the UN stepped up and said, you can't do that. And Putin, a much more intelligent man than the head of the UN, simply pointed to the UN Constitution and said, what about Section 1 where it says we have the right of self-determination? Are you now saying that they don't have the right of self-determination? And he went, oh, yeah, okay, we recognize it.
That's why they genocide.
You read it first.
Okay, so on appeal, Supreme Court, this happened in 1950, you must have heard of this. Attorney General of Nova Scotia versus the Attorney General of Canada. They did hold, it was held, that the Parliament of Canada and each provincial legislature is a sovereign body.
Correct.
Within its sphere, possessed of exclusive jurisdiction to legislate with regard to the subject matters assigned to it under Section 91 or 92, as the case may be. They're talking about the BNA.
I know.
Neither is capable, therefore, of delegating to the other the powers with which it has been vested, nor of receiving from the other the powers with which the other has been vested. Now, can you explain that last 2 lines? Because that could fall into the Quarantine Act and this and that.
Well, actually, it's not applicable today because that was 1950. And in 1950, they were sovereign states. The provinces were sovereign states, as per the BNA. Okay. In 1982 through 1985, all the provinces became sub-corporations of the parent corporation in maritime jurisdiction and de facto governments. So the BNA is not applicable, other than they keep it there to show you that, oh, here, look at, we have this that we're, and the reality is that they are, once again, we look at the 82 Canada Act, which brought the BNA in. They've never actually even ratified their own act by writing a second proclamation under the Great Seal of Canada to allow that to come into force and effect under maritime jurisdiction.
They have I didn't check on the enactment too, but it is on the website, the government website.
Yep.
Enactment 1, enactment 2, there's only 2 of them.
Yep.
But they keep bringing it up in court, and I've seen so many citations and rulings and so on. So,
The minute they bring it up in court, I would then jump on it and say, so, Judge, are you bound by BNA 1867? And that would drag that court into English common law. Because if its response is yes, of course we're bound by that, thank you, then you're a court of competent jurisdiction.
okay.
And that's when you can see, this is why I would like to get into court, because then I bring in Section 109 of BNA and say, Okay, declaration, and Crown patent, updated, section 109, last sentence, see what it says there, Judge? Yes, that's what they're talking about. Oh shit, you just set precedent. Damn. And the judge, and then the government is really in trouble because they've been securitizing and selling them to bankers. Because they're very valuable. Yes.
So,
Right.
so if we're not under any rule at all,
Correct.
let's say a neighborhood gets together and they're like, they determine stuff, maybe you can't get out the whole of Ontario, but if a neighborhood gets together and they're like, they get, say, the street to all agree, like the because the Perry Constitution did that, right? There's a group in the Perrys that did that, where they got together and they created a constitution for themselves. Does that mean they can exist as a nation?
No. No, you need, in order for you to exist, you need to be recognized. So when Iceland did that, and they did it properly, with the way it should, it has to be done in order to get recognition. England was the first to recognize it. They were the very first. The British Empire was the first to recognize Iceland's new constitutional government, etc., etc. And likewise in the Donbass, once the UN agreed that the Donbass had the right of self-determination, all the other nations, other than the Western nations, gave it recognition. The United States to this day didn't give it recognition, neither has the EU. Yes,
They
or
would have
Canada.
too much to lose, they gave it recognition.
Well, exactly. And so, but the other nations, in BRICS and outside the BRICS, gave it recognition, etc., etc. The war, God, I hope that ends quickly. I hope Putin does what he should have done a year ago and just go to Kiev, grab Zelensky, put him up against a wall, shoot him, and then let's go. Now we'll sign a peace treaty
Let the people.
and let the people live. Exactly.
Did Iceland have such a convoluted history as Canada?
No, what's funny about Iceland was their banks took in all this British investment.
That was from the 08 collapse.
From the 08 collapse. And the bankers said to the government, come on and bail us out to $3.6 billion. We need $3.6 billion for a bailout. And the government said, okay, we'll bail you out. And the British citizens would get, there was no Icelandic citizens getting bailed out. It was all going to Great Britain. So the Icelandic people rose up and said, to hell with that, and they arrested the bankers that didn't escape on their private jets, and they arrested the parliament guys, the prime minister and the ministers involved with that bailout, put them in jail. And then they said, well, we're going to amend the Constitution. And they looked at the Constitution, they said, we can't amend this, so we're going to take certain clauses from the old Constitution, put it in the new one, but we're going to write a new Constitution. And they did. And that's how that came about. But yeah, they stood up and said, in jail you go.
There's a good movie that came out after the collapse that focuses on that Iceland.
Yeah.
It's called The Inside Job.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to watch that.
Okay.
So, back to this judges and the securities and, so if that's the case, and you have to re-say that again to get it through your head, but, then why haven't somebody just started that ball rolling to knock their little house of cards down?
Hi, my name is Doug Forrest, and I'm from the Myth is Canada. I'm the guy kicking that ball. That's me.
How can we help?
Yeah. By taking the information that you got here, by going to the website, and by spreading it around. I'm here to teach. I don't preach at you, I don't tell you what to do. I believe that we have the right of self-determination. What does that mean? That means that we get together as a collective and make up our own minds as to how we want to be governed and how we want to move forward into the future. And that's up to the individuals. The smallest minority in the world today is the individual. And so we have to respect each other's boundaries. Go ahead.
How do we get that written information booklet on that patents?
That, I do that off of donations, because we.
Yes, so you can't get that off your website?
Oh, yeah, you can donate through the website, and then I'll send you there's, on where it says donation page,
Okay.
you touch that, and it'll tell you how to donate, and then I'll send you